Hey, everybody, welcome to a new series here on Improv Tips where I get to get deeper into some of the bigger and more important issues in improv today. My guest today is Jess Napthine-Hodgkinson. She is an improviser and facilitator from England and the founder of Brain Fog Improv, an online community for improvisers with hidden conditions. And that is actually the topic of our conversation today. She sent me this improv tip, ding ding, right here, that sort of got the whole ball rolling. And I thought, gosh, I think there's that hints at a bigger idea. So she was so generous with her time, and we were able to do this sit down interview and talk about improvisers with hidden conditions and how do we make them more welcome into the improv community at large. It's a really fantastic conversation. I think you're going to learn a lot. I know that I did. So let's get at it.
Hey everybody, welcome to this discussion. So I got this improv tip, which you're probably linking from. If not, I'll ding ding link it here so you can get back to it. From Jess Napthine-Hodgkinson about playing at your own pace. I think it's a really interesting tip, and I think it really sort of hinted at a bigger thought, a bigger situation. So I want to sort of follow up. So Jess has been generous enough to give us a little bit more time today. Jess, thank you. How are you doing today?
I'm very good, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you. This is very exciting for me. So let's just start talking about you are the founder or one of the founders at least of the Brain Fog Facebook page, right? And tell us
Yes.
that what is sort of like the thrust or the focus of that Facebook page?
So, Brain Fog Improv is a group that I set up during the pandemic because as everything went online, as improv did, um, I came across more and more improvisers that had unseen conditions and some seen conditions as well, sort of physical, visible disabilities and conditions that were able for the first time to kind of access improv in a different way. You know, all of a sudden people were able to do improv sitting down or laying down, which hadn't really been an option for some people before, or they hadn't been able to access improv because there was none in their area, or if it was up a flight of stairs that they couldn't get up. So I found that there were lots of other improvisers that had seen and unseen conditions, and that a lot of people were facing a lot of different kind of challenges and obstacles to accessing improv. And I wanted to find out a bit more about what that was and create a sort of community to help people and to put people in contact and to have those conversations about that kind of aspect of things.
Excellent. So I think that's such a great it was such a great resource. I've joined just recently and already have learned so much, or at least I'll be perfectly honest, I've probably learned more about what I don't know. Like I've learned like, oh, I don't really know anything about this. So I really do appreciate you sharing. As I said before we started recording, I've had maybe one or two students who have expressed to me, hey, I have this situation that basically expresses as sort of chronic fatigue. So I'm kind of going to be low energy. And okay, great, sure. Sorry, those are my dogs. They are never low. And that was always helpful to me. But I feel like that's just sort of really putting the onus on those players rather
Mm.
than me as a facilitator kind of saying, hey, like for example, I think what's new and different now about improv since the pandemic, say, is maybe at the beginning of class asking people, hey, say your name and what are your pronouns and this sort of thing, sort of, you know, welcoming people into that space. Um, what can we do? Not that the whole thing's on you, obviously, but what can we do, or what have you seen people do that is effective to welcome people or make those people more comfortable to share their needs as individuals?
Yeah, I think one of the things that my friend and somebody that I've collaborated with on various improv things before, and who's just taught a session for us recently, Velvet Wells, does brilliantly, is to sort of set the stage before you even get to one of their workshops.
Mm,
So they will send out a Google form that you get ahead of time, and then they send it to you in the workshop as well and give you time to complete it so that they know anything that you want to tell them that maybe you don't want to share with the whole group. I
yeah.
think that's one of the sort of differences is that, you know, the chat function on Zoom has been a godsend for a lot of people because they can then, without drawing any attention to themselves. If they don't want any attention, or if they don't want this to be a public discussion, they can just say, by the way, I'm sitting out for this reason, or by the way, I'm finding this really difficult, or just have that conversation right at the start. And I think people have become a bit more conscientious around those sort of check-ins and those discussions that happen at the start of a class.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of expanded, whereas I think it used to generally be a bit of, we're going to do this workshop, remember, we want to create a safe, nice space, and if you've got any physical reasons why you can't do anything, let us know and we'll find a way around it. And then that would be it. But now I think people take a bit more time at the start of classes, or at least I hope they do. They certainly do in the sessions that I've been to, even the ones that I've been to since we've come back into in-person improv. People now recognise that you actually need to take better care of people if you are running a class or running a workshop, and that means kind of outlining to them what different accommodations and what different boundaries might be, and what you mean by those words as well. So having those conversations and making them really easy for people to grasp. So we're going to say our boundaries, and if you would like to tell me privately, then here's how you can do that. By boundaries, I mean these things. By accommodations, I mean these things. I think having that shared language, we're starting to get that a bit now, getting this sort of lexicon of care that is sort of developing. And so now it's a lot easier, I think, for people to have those conversations and to feel comfortable sharing those things. So I think that's something that people can continue to work on.
For sure. I know that sort of just hearing you say that makes me cringe a little bit, because I know that I've done that sort of broad brush, sort of like, hey, let's just make it safe for everybody. Here we go, and just sort of like pushing on. So I definitely know that I've done that in the past and am trying to do better moving forward. And this discussion definitely is part of that for me. And Velvet just did this ding ding great tip about back pocket games, which is really great if people want to check that out as well. I want to ask, sir, in terms of like common vocabulary, common lexicon, can we just backtrack a moment and just say, like, maybe people don't know, certainly I'm just becoming familiar with what do you mean when you say like unseen conditions, or what sort of what is the broad, and there's probably a broad spectrum, but what is the broad spectrum of people's needs and sort of what accommodations we made? Maybe let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it does, as you rightly say, cover a wide gamut of things. And I don't really want to put too much of a, this is what an unseen condition is and this isn't. I would say it's sort of any sort of pre-existing condition that you know about that you can possibly articulate in a way to say, I have this condition and it makes it more difficult for me to do this, or it makes this unpleasant for me to have to do, or so for me, my particular unseen condition is that I have MS, multiple sclerosis. So I might have periods of fatigue. I might have periods where I can't get my words, and that's where the name brain fog improv came from, because that's one of the most common sort of symptoms of MS and common across lots of unseen conditions. But by unseen conditions, I wanted to cover as many things as possible. So I didn't want to just say disabilities, because there might be a lot of conditions that are not classified as disabilities. I also didn't want to say illnesses, because illnesses are things that generally might pass. So the conditions I would say would cover all sorts of things, from things like sort of autism and dyspraxia and dyslexia, chronic fatigue, neurological conditions, autoimmune conditions, and also obviously all of the kind of seen conditions like physical disabilities that people might be able to see. But a lot of conditions have sort of comorbidities with other conditions. So a lot of the time I have quite a few friends that are autistic and also have ADHD. or also have another, condition that goes along with it. So quite often there's a lot of kind of interlinking issues. So people might just sort of talk about the one that is sort of most prominent on that day and not feel comfortable to talk about lots of other ones that might be having a different impact on them. So I wanted to sort of create a space that was as broad as possible to cover as many different possible conditions as we could cover.
So when we're talking about so many different kinds of situations or conditions, the access needs, I imagine, could be very different from condition to condition. Can you sort of give me sort of like a sense of what facilitators should be sort of start thinking about and should start being prepared for in terms of, I know one of the specific things we talked about before we even started shooting was about warm-ups, different kinds of warm-ups, right? So I imagine that's one thing. So we can talk a little bit more about that, and then tell us kind of what other sorts of things might I, as a facilitator, be really sort of brainstorming about before we dig in, before we start the class.
Yeah, warm-ups are so useful, but if a warm-up is so energetic that it saps all of the energy that somebody might have for that whole session, then it's not going to be an effective sort of warm-up for them. There's a thing in chronic illnesses called spoon theory, which is the idea that if you're suffering from a chronic condition or multiple conditions, you might have so many spoons of energy through that day, and you have to then work out your day according to, I have this many spoons worth of energy to expel today, to expend today. So if you have allotted 3 spoons for your improv class, and then you have a super intense, super high energy workshop that takes 2.5 spoons, then that doesn't leave you very much for the rest of the workshop. So, and it's not to say that you can't do these energetic things. It's just to be mindful of maybe structuring your workshop so that there are high energy and medium energy and low energy kind of sectors, or maybe there are different ways to do that particular warm-up that still exercises the skill that you want to exercise, but maybe does it in a less energy intensive way. As I mentioned before about, people have only recently realized that people can do improv sitting down. That's something that you can bring back to kind of in-person sessions and performances as well. I'm trying to find ways to adapt games, exercises, warm-ups that fit your group and work for the people that are in that group. And I think that's where there's some really interesting discoveries to be made in that. And your best resource is going to be the people in your group. Ask them what felt good in that, what felt bad in that, how would you like to change it to make it more fun for you. That's how I sort of introduced the idea of, the accommodations idea is what do you want to tell me that would make this a more fun, more enjoyable session for you? What do I need to know in order to structure this in a way that is going to be best for you? And I think that really helps people to sort of take more ownership of the sessions that they're in and to really feel like a valued part of it as well. And then hopefully the more we can do that, the more we will have improv facilitators and teachers that have chronic conditions, and then they're going to be much better able, because they've spent their whole life adapting the world to fit the way they need to do things. The more that we have those people teaching and facilitating, the more likely it is that things will be just accessible by design rather than trying to work it into a shape that works for other people.
Right. That makes sense. That makes sense. And it sounds like sort of what part of like what I'm getting as a facilitator or a teacher is that it's really kind of behooves me or incumbent upon me to sort of start that discussion. Whereas maybe in the past, I had been sort of like open to that discussion, but like really relying on someone to tell me. But I love what you said about Velvet's idea of sending out that survey ahead of time and sort of in privacy and in the sort of at their convenience, people can let you know ahead of time. I think that makes so much sense to me. I think in the past, maybe I'll speak for my own personal experience, I maybe haven't felt comfortable sort of broaching that because of like, oh, that's your private business or that's whatever. But I guess in a private sort of survey or whatever, people have the opportunity to answer as much or as little or in whatever way they want.
Yeah,
That makes a
absolutely.
ton of sense to me. Yeah. And then so high energy and low energy and making sort of accommodation in terms of like, oh, let's do some scene sitting or that's a possibility. Those are some great accommodations that can be made. Are there some other things that maybe I, as sort of a novice in this subject, might not even be thinking of, or that I should be thinking about?
I think the as well as just the physical energetic side of it, that
Hmm.
sometimes the mental energetic side of it can be something that gets overlooked. So I put a post on the Brain Fog Improv group before chatting to you to ask whether any of the group had any kind of thoughts that they wanted to communicate. And something that one of the people said was that actually games that involve a lot of fast mental processing and getting things in the right order or memory can be really, really difficult for a lot of people because of a variety of reasons. I love the alphabet game. It's one of my favorite improv games, but I also know it's not very fun for some of my dyslexic improvisers.
Mm.
So I know that, if it's up to me, it would be in every session, but that's not going to be fun for everyone. So, making sure that, there are exercises and games for everyone, and that you are sort of constantly getting that feedback and giving people, as you mentioned, giving people opportunities to give you feedback. So not just in the session, because we know that people might not feel confident or comfortable enough to
Right.
raise issues in the moment, but just creating some kind of mechanism for them to contact you after the session to say, actually, that game really didn't work very well for me for this reason.
Mhm.
So that you can then have that conversation and go, okay, great, how can we adapt that game? Because, maybe they really enjoyed playing it, but it's just the way that you played it didn't
Mhm.
really work for them. Or they said like, oh, well, I liked this bit of it, but that bit of it felt really bad for me or really awkward for me. So finding that way to continue that conversation with your group. And I think looking to kind of the online communities that have kind of come up fairly recently, and the ones that have been existing for a long time, like sort of improv discussion and resources, all of those sort of groups, being able to now ask the whole world of improvisers, this is an issue that I encountered, have you encountered something like this? And there will always be lots of people that can come back to you and give you sort of the benefit of their experience as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that idea of being open and available and having some sort of channel of communication. So looking at that same thread that you mentioned, I saw a lot of the word discussion over and over again. People said, have discussions, be open to discussions, like really
Mm.
be open and available to this. So I think that's definitely something that that's very obvious and very doable, is to be open to those discussions and that constant feedback loop as we're learning. As someone who maybe does not have a hidden condition or whatever, like I need to be especially sort of attentive to that feedback coming in. For
Mm.
sure. I think that's really interesting.
I think
Um,
also, just acknowledging that you don't know everything, and that's okay. Just because you are running the session or running a workshop, it doesn't mean that you're always going to get things right. It doesn't mean that you're going to know everything. And sometimes something might come up and you might not handle it perfectly. But as long as you are kind of open to that and you hold my hands up and say, yeah, I handled that wrong. I want to handle it better in future. How can I do that? then people will be willing to help you. And there are also people with organizations that deal with kind of accessibility. There's one called letusin.uk. So if you look that up, that has some resources that sort of give you templates for having some of these sort of discussions as well, encouraging people to submit access statements if they would like to do that. So that's something where a performer or an improviser can basically outline what needs they have and what accommodations need to be made in order for them to do whatever it is that you're doing. So things like that can be really, really useful, so that you can get that information and sort of put that into practice as early as possible.
Great. I'll try to sort of loop together some of those resources, and I'm sure there's some also on the Brain Fog website. So those that are available for the public, I'll try to include in the description of this discussion so people can access those more easily. Really great. Anything else that I'm missing? I'll admit right now, I don't know what I don't know for sure. That's the story of my life, Jess, honestly. So any sort of facet of this that I'm really sort of just not even thinking to ask about that I'm missing?
I don't know. You put me on the spot now.
Oh, sorry, that's not my intention.
But
sometimes you know how you're talking with someone about it, and they're like, "But wouldn't you even ask about this?" Like, "Oh no, I wouldn't even think that."
Yeah, I know that as soon as we sort of finish this conversation, five things will pop into my head.
Of course.
But yeah, I think sometimes we have to kind of practice what we preach a little bit, and kind of show people what it looks like to share boundaries or to share accommodations. So yeah, just making it as easy as possible for people to do that, and to continue that reaching out to people and try and get in, guest teachers or workshop leaders, or work with people that have unseen conditions, because they will come at things from a completely different perspective that you possibly never even thought about. But it always brings really interesting kind of developments as well, so that's always good.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much of your expertise and your experience with us, and your time, of course, your precious time. Thank you for doing this supplement to your really great improv tip. As I said, ding ding, if you haven't checked it out, please check that out. If you stumbled upon this some other direction, then check out that improv tip. I have all your links and everything down below, so people can check those out. Again, thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.